Welcome to PRAJNA SPARKS Contemplation interlude, where we discuss last week's Dharma talk and address your questions. Please take a moment to like, follow, and review our podcast. This is the best possible offering as it helps us to reach new listeners. Hi, Zopa.
Hi, Yeshe. One of the things that I was thinking about in terms of samsara is that it often seems like there's some resistance that arises when we hear the teachings on samsara. It's almost like we feel like we're being asked to give up something that we love or something that we like, or that we have to ignore what gives us pleasure or something like that. I think it takes a lot of different forms. And I've definitely noticed it in myself over the years working with it. I witness it rearing its head in my own internal landscape at times. And I've seen it happen for other people as well. And so I'm just curious what you think this is and how you respond to it, how you work with it.
This is a great question. It's actually similar to one I had ready to ask you. When can we just accept samsara as good enough? Do we ever get to a point where we don't have this desire to leave samsara? For me, that question has to do with the crux of what samsara is and is not. If we're clear about what samsara is, there really isn't much question about, is it ever good enough? Is it okay? Can I just keep what I like? Because the crux of it is that samsara is the misperception, the obscuration, the impediment to living your life with all the goodness that you already have, none of the discomfort that you don't want, and then on top of that, more wisdom, caring, and power than we can ever imagine. If that's what we're understanding, then the question of resistance to limitless wisdom, caring, and power doesn't really come up. Having all the goodness that we enjoy without the hope that we can hold on to it against all of the things that threaten it, the fear that we won't be able to do that, and so forth, they don't come up. We confuse our life for samsara. Our life is not samsara. Our life is being rolled out in samsara, and we are influenced by samsara in our very bodies, our perceptions, our understanding, the operation of our consciousness, the way we interact or even comprehend what other beings are. When we have a more accurate understanding of that, then we're able to say, well, I'm not just removing my life. In the text, there's an acknowledgement of how difficult it is to distinguish samsara from the promise of nirvana. Let's face it, we haven't experienced nirvana. Nirvana is a state that doesn't fall back. Once we've been liberated from the misperception that characterizes samsara, we don't fall back into that misperception, which means we've never experienced it, or we'd still be there. It's a very difficult thing that the Buddha is attempting. It's a sign of his immense compassion to go past this initial inclination of saying, oh, there's no way even I can describe this. It's too subtle. And that example is, apparently swans have this legendary capacity of being able to drink the milk out of a mixture of water and milk. It's besides the point whether that can actually happen. That's what it's like, being able to drink the milk out of a drink of water and milk and leave behind the water. So it is very difficult, and it is something we have to continually connect with so that we can not equate leaving samsara with leaving everything that we love. It's quite the opposite. It's having everything we love in all its fullness and then some.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. I mean, I think it's so helpful to hear it again and again, because I think at least for me, it seems like when we hear the teachings on what's usually translated as renunciation or reorientation of mind, we hone in on, oh, I have to give up things, and not enough emphasis sparks in our own mind on just what you're talking about, on the fact that what we're talking about is perfect bliss, wisdom, true enjoyment, all of these different things. But because we don't have an experience of that, because we're so impoverished in our samsaric mindset as to actual happiness, that we, in some ways, it's really heartbreaking. It just points to how tightly we cling to these little tidbits of seeming pleasure, of seeming happiness, instead of the birthright that we have of genuine happiness.
Another way I like to reframe this question is being less than your true nature ever good enough? One iota less than all that wisdom, love, compassion, fearlessness, courage, capacity. Is that good enough?
Yeah. I think turning it around to take in both sides. And I often think of our teacher, Drupal Khenpo at Kulahari Monastery in Nepal, when he emphasizes how one-sided we can get when we hear these teachings, and instead of hearing the fullness, hearing the promise and the potential of our Buddha nature, of the innate nature of our mind, and how that's replete with the qualities, and how that's really what this teaching on samsara is. It's not just about impoverishment, giving up the little bit of things that we like and resigning ourselves to drudgery, as much as it is recognizing that. So.
It's difficult. So it's also important not to berate ourselves if we have a hard time and slip into that resistance that you described so poignantly. We have this fixation, this like obsession or even addiction to believing that things exist the way we experience them. And it takes a measure of trust to take on the Buddha's teachings, even enough to experiment with them and say, well, let's give it a try. So it's also important to be gentle with ourselves. We're in the grip of that dualistic way of seeing things that says either I have what I love or I don't. That is samsara. It's not like you're stuck with that or you're liberated. When we go through that process that I like to describe as healing, transforming, and transcending, from the very start, there's a change. Even when we begin to heal, certainly when our perspective begins to transform, we're already experiencing life with a lot more lightness, a lot more sacred creativity, a lot more nimbleness that isn't so tied to falling down on one side or the other. And that's before we get to the transcendence that is liberation. And I want to be clear, transcendence isn't about leaving life behind or anything like that. The transcendence is the transcendence of mistake, the transcendence of mistake versus not mistake, ignorance versus wisdom. It's a wholeness that is able to comprehend all things. It is very different than a samsara that clings to things as we perceive them, even in the middle of the suffering.
Exactly. And I love that use of the word wholeness, because I think it does speak, at least to my understanding of my concept of what this could be like, in the sense that there's that feeling of acceptance, of welcome. In some ways, it boils down almost to like a form of self-compassion, self-kindness, where we're welcoming in life and the world and our experience, and recognizing the abundance contained within all of it, beyond that, all the dualistic ideas and mistakes that we continually wrap ourselves up in, that makes us feel impoverished and like there's not enough.
Thank you for that perfect segue for the question that I have for you. Just as we've talked about, it's hard to distinguish what is and isn't samsara. What guidance do we have to offer? Any readings or meditations or practices that can help the listener more deeply integrate an accurate understanding of samsara into their lives?
That's a great question. And in some ways, I feel like the whole path is about that. I think for me, I would say one of the ways into understanding what it is about that's really in line with what you and I have been discussing up to this point is just anything that gives us an uplifted sense of the Dharma qualities. In many ways, I feel like that's such a poignant example of what we're missing out on. So for me personally, I find the prayers, the teachings related to devotion, to the excellent qualities of Buddha nature, all of those to me feel like this really uplifted way of saying, oh yes, I want that. I want what the Buddhas have. I want, in celebrating and praising their qualities, there's something about that recognition of that innate peace within ourselves that sparks for me, that says, oh yes, that's what I want. So it feels like a very uplifted way of looking at all the defects of samsaric mind that I currently experience, where it says, oh yes, it's my pride, my jealousy, my desire, my ignorance, all of these things that hold me back from that whole experience of welcoming in life, welcoming in whatever occurs in a way that's really present, that's really skillful, that's the fullness of love and compassion. So that's what I'd say. How about you?
Everything the Buddha teaches is about doing this. But I think there's a very salient point. The Buddha himself, after considering how in the world he's going to present something so enigmatic, starts out with recognize suffering. So this question is not so much about, I don't know what to do. The Buddha lays it out at the beginning. See the suffering, even in what you find pleasurable. That's the flip side of all those magnificent qualities you talked about. You never get to the point of wanting to know what more there is if you haven't gotten fed up with the disadvantages of even what feels great. Let's face it, most of you out there listening to this have very privileged existences. You're not struggling for food. You're not struggling for shelter. You're not struggling for clothing. You have pretty good lives. And there's a kind of denial that says, I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to hedge my bets and play it safe. And at the same time, the lurking knowledge, the spark of Buddha nature that says it's not enough. I know there's more. When we recognize the discomfort, even in what we find pleasant, even as we're enjoying a wonderful day in the summer with our family full of love and no discord, we know it's slipping through our fingers. We know that we're not fully in control, even in this life, of having that happen again. And we extend that. We recognize that it isn't just about me. We live in a world that is battered by strife. There are people in immense suffering, animals in immense suffering, beings we don't even see on other planes of existence in immense suffering. It's not easy to look at these things. It hurts. And there's a kind of denial, the resistance we've been talking about. But it's precisely that that's keeping us stuck, making do with far less than we could be, struggling for a way to make samsara okay. It's not okay.
Yeah.
To me, the question is one definitely embedded in listening, contemplating, and meditating. What's beautiful about that is The Buddha teaches in what's called the 84,000 dharmas so that we can find the one of those 84,000 ways that really suits us. So really connecting with the substance of the teachings, which is the listening, bringing it to mind and to heart to really think about it, to make sense of what it means in our own experience, and then to practice it, because we're very good at that much. We're kind of trained in a very scholastic mindset. Even the least schooled of us is much more educated than the historical Buddhist practitioner of the last couple of millennia. But it's that putting it into practice, taking it into experience through meditation, which literally means to habituate, to get used to seeing things from this different light. And there may be any number of different ways that resonates for us. If we're using another framework that we've talked about in this podcast, it might be that simplicity is a good portal for you, a good entryway to really start to identify the ways that we get caught up in the vain promises of samsara. Things like, well, if you do this, you'll have all the money, all the fame, all the family, all the love that you want. Is that true? How much of your time are you putting into that? And what kind of a return on your investment are you getting? That kind of thing. Or it might be courage. That sense of, I would like to step out of myself and that self-importance that I know I have and see every day how much more I can extend into caring for others as a way of caring for myself. Another possibility is paradox. Living in the experience of things being one way and the understanding, the prajna, that comes from listening, contemplating, and meditating, that things are not as they seem to be, and then also just so. Having that sense of holding the paradox of recognizing that this seems to be reality to me, and at the same time have an understanding that it's not exactly the way it seems. Like being in a movie theater, you can sit there and enjoy whatever is happening in the movie and be very absorbed by it and still not be under the misperception that you're actually in that place and time. It boils down to getting a handle on whatever ways the Buddha's teachings resonate for us and really getting that understanding integrated into our lives so that when we get up off the cushion, which is, let's face it, at least 95% of our time, we're able to put that understanding into practice, use everything that life has to offer as a stepping stone to our greater understanding, our greater revelation of our own true nature. Take something that is already being offered as a wonderful opportunity and make the most of it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. I really love just getting to chat with you about these things. Thank you.
Me too. And thank you to all the listeners for the great questions and comments. This is a really poignant question and literally one that we do work with for the entire course of our path. Beginning in about 2 weeks, I'll be offering a practice intensive called Living Beautifully that will go for 2 months. And we'll use Anipema Children's book, Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change, as a springboard for examining simplicity, courage, paradox, healing, transforming, transcending, all of the ways we can incorporate our highest aspiration for ourselves into our everyday lives. Registration information is in the episode notes.
This has been Zopa and Yeshe. Join us on the full moon for our next full episode. We can't thank you enough for taking the time to like, follow, share, and review PRAJNA SPARKS. It means a lot to us. If you have any questions, contact us via email, Instagram, or Facebook. Check the episode notes for those links and for more resources on today's topic. Visit us on the web at prajnafire.com or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at PRAJNA SPARKS. Thank you for listening. May all beings benefit.